The oil was still warm when I found it. There I was, flat on my back under my beat-up Ford pickup at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, when my flashlight caught something that didn't belong, a small black box, no bigger than a deck of cards, magnetically clamped to my undercarriage like some kind of automotive parasite. A GPS tracker. I stared at the thing for a full minute, my mind racing through possibilities. Someone was following me. But who? And why would anyone give a damn about tracking a 42-year-old auto mechanic who spent his days elbow-deep in engine grease and his nights watching Netflix reruns? The answer hit me like a wrench to the skull. Marissa, my loving wife of 18 years, had been worried about my safety lately, always asking where I was going, when I'd be back, suggesting I text her updates during my evening drives. I'd thought it was sweet. Turns out, she just wanted to make sure her surveillance equipment was working properly. I crawled out from under the truck, wiping my hands on an already filthy rag, and walked toward the house. Through the kitchen window, I could see Marissa at the table, her phone glowing in the darkness. As I watched, the device buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced around nervously before opening it, and even from outside I could see her face light up with a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She typed back quickly, giggling like a teenager. My stomach dropped. I crept closer to the window, staying in the shadows. The neighbor's porch light cast just enough illumination for me to make out the contact name on her screen. D. Not Dave from work or dentist office, just D. Another message appeared, and this time I caught a glimpse of the content before she quickly closed the app. Something about missing you, and can't wait for tomorrow night. Wow, hell, I always wanted to be in a reality show. Too bad I was the punchline. I stood there in my own backyard, oil stains on my shirt and betrayal burning in my chest, watching my wife of nearly 2 decades flirt with some mystery man while tracking my every movement. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was so busy monitoring where I was going, she forgot to hide where she'd already been. Mrs. Talbot's silhouette appeared in her kitchen window next door. The old busybody was probably loving this late-night drama, filing away every detail for tomorrow's neighborhood gossip session. In a town like Millbrook, Michigan, everyone's business became everyone else's entertainment. I walked back to my truck, grabbed a socket wrench, and carefully removed the tracker. The device was professional grade, not some cheap Amazon special. Someone had invested real money in monitoring my movements. The question was whether Marissa had bought it herself, or if Dee was the tech-savvy type. Mom, my phone buzzed. A text from my wife. Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you. Right. Working late. At 11:45 p.m. in our kitchen. While sexting someone whose name started with D. I pocketed the tracker and headed inside, making sure to stomp my boots loudly on the porch steps. By the time I opened the door, Marissa was already upstairs, and I could hear water running in the master bathroom, probably washing off the guilt. Our daughter Sienna's bedroom door was closed, music leaking out despite the late hour. At 16, she'd become a master of passive-aggressive behavior, treating me like an embarrassing inconvenience she couldn't wait to escape. These days, she barely acknowledged my existence unless she needed money or a ride somewhere. I sat at the kitchen table, where Marissa had been conducting her digital affair, and stared at the tracker in my palm. Such a small thing to destroy a marriage. Though if I was being honest, the marriage had been circling the drain for months. This just explained why. The shower stopped running upstairs. I slipped the tracker into my toolbox and grabbed a beer from the fridge, settling into my recliner to plan my next move. If Marissa wanted to play surveillance games, I was happy to oblige, but she was about to learn that 18 years of marriage had taught me a few things about her habits too. And unlike her, I wouldn't need electronic devices to gather intelligence. I pulled out my own phone and started researching GPS trackers, learning about battery life, range, and most importantly, how to manipulate the data they collected. If my wife wanted to know where I was going, I'd make sure she got some very interesting information. Tomorrow, I decided, Nathan Miller was taking a little trip. And thanks to modern technology, Marissa would have a front-row seat to watch her carefully constructed world start falling apart. Wednesday morning arrived, with the kind of gray drizzle that made Millbrook look like a postcard from purgatory. I'd barely slept, my mind churning through possibilities and plans. Marissa had left early for client meetings, kissing my cheek with lips that had probably whispered sweet lies to someone else the night before. Sienna grabbed a granola bar and headed for the door without a word. Just another day in the Miller family paradise. I called in sick to work, something I hadn't done in 3 years. My boss, Jerry, understood. Take care of yourself, Nate. You sound like hell. If only he knew. My first stop was Ricky's boxing gym on the south side of town. Ricky Kowalski had been my best friend since high school, back when we both thought we'd conquer the world with our fists and our attitude. Life had humbled us both, but Ricky had channeled his fighting spirit into running the only decent gym in a 50-mile radius. I found him in the office, paperwork spread across a desk that had seen better decades. "You look like someone ran over your dog," he said without looking up. "Worse, someone's running around on my wife." That got his attention. Ricky had been a cop for 12 years before a knee injury forced him into retirement. He still had the instincts, and more importantly, he still had contacts in places that could be useful. I told him about the tracker, about Marissa's late-night texting, about the mysterious D, who was apparently worth destroying an 18-year marriage. "You want to know who he is?" Ricky asked. "I want to know everything. Where they meet, how long it's been going on, whether our daughter knows." I paused. "And then I want them to pay for it." Ricky leaned back in his chair, studying me with the same intensity he'd once reserved for interrogating suspects. "Revenge is a dangerous game, Nate. You sure you want to play? They started it when they put that tracker on my truck. I'm just going to finish it." He nodded slowly. "All right. But we do this smart. No broken laws, no assault charges, nothing that comes back to bite you in a divorce proceeding." "Agreed." Ricky opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small device that looked remarkably similar to the one I'd found under my truck. "Counter surveillance," he explained. "We'll put this on Loverboy's car once we figure out who he is. Turn the tables. How do we find him? Easy. Tonight, you're taking a little road trip. Somewhere far enough away to make your wife panic, but not so far that you can't get back quickly when the fun starts." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I'd attached the tracker to a long-haul truck heading north, creating the illusion that I was driving toward Canada. Meanwhile, I'd check into a local motel under a fake name and wait for Marissa's world to implode. "Why would her lover care if I'm traveling?" I asked. "Because guilty people are paranoid people. If you're supposed to be predictably at home or work, and suddenly you're heading for the border, they're going to assume you know something." We spent the afternoon working out details. Ricky knew a trucker named Big Jim who made regular runs to Detroit and beyond. For $50, Jim would take my tracker on a scenic tour of the upper Midwest. At 6 p.m., I drove to the truck stop on Highway 23. Big Jim was exactly what you'd expect from someone with that nickname. 6'4", beard like a grizzly bear, and arms that could probably bench press my pickup. "Ricky says you need a favor," he rumbled. I handed him the tracker and the $50 bill. "Just stick this somewhere on your rig. I'll collect it when you get back." "Wife troubles?" "Something like that," he grinned, revealing teeth that had seen better decades. "Been there, brother. This little gadget's going to see more of America than most tourists." I watched his 18-wheeler pull onto the highway, carrying my electronic doppelganger toward whatever chaos was about to unfold. Then I drove to the Sleepy Inn Motel, an establishment that specialized in discretion and asked no questions as long as you paid cash. The room smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams, but it had a clear view of the parking lot and decent cell phone reception. I settled in to wait. The first text from Marissa came at 8:47 p.m. "How was your day? Miss you." I didn't respond. Let her wonder. At 9:23, my phone rang. Marissa's name on the caller ID. "Hey babe," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Where are you?" "I tried calling the house, but you didn't answer." "Went for a drive. Needed to clear my head." "Oh, well, when will you be home?" "I was hoping we could talk." "Not sure. Might drive around for a while longer." A pause. "Okay, well, be safe. I love you." "Love you too." I hung up and turned off my phone. By now, Big Jim would be approaching the Michigan-Canada border, and Marissa would be watching her tracking app in growing confusion and panic. I grabbed a beer from the motel's vending machine and settled in to imagine the conversation she was probably having with D right about now. Nothing like a little uncertainty to reveal people's true priorities. Around midnight, I turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls from Marissa, 12 text messages, and 3 voicemails. The progression from concerned to frantic was almost artistic, but the real prize was a text that had come in at 11:43 p.m. from a number I didn't recognize. "Where the hell is your husband? The tracker shows him in Canada." Gotcha. I screenshot the message before it disappeared, then saved the phone number. Tomorrow, I'd find out exactly who Dee was, and then the real fun could begin. Thursday morning, I returned home to find Marissa in the kitchen, dark circles under her eyes and her hands shaking as she held her coffee cup. She looked like she'd been awake all night, which was probably accurate. "There you are," she said, relief and suspicion battling in her voice. "I was so worried. Where did you go?" "Just drove around, thinking about things." I poured myself coffee, noting how she flinched when I moved too close. "Ended up at that old diner near Lansing, fell asleep in the parking lot. You could have called. I barely slept." "Sorry. Didn't want to wake you." She studied my face, looking for signs of deception. The irony was delicious. Sienna stumbled into the kitchen, grabbed a Pop-Tart, and headed for the door without acknowledging either of us. Just another happy family breakfast. After Marissa left for work, I drove back to Ricky's gym. He was waiting with information. "Your mystery man is Dylan Reeves," he said, sliding a manila folder across his desk. 34 years old, works in tech support for some startup downtown. Drives a blue Tesla, lives in those new condos by the river. I opened the folder. Dylan looked exactly like what you'd expect from someone who'd steal another man's wife. Perfectly styled hair, expensive clothes, and the kind of smug expression that made you want to rearrange his face. "How'd you find him so fast?" Ran the phone number through a contact at the phone company. Amazing what people will tell you if you ask nicely and mention you used to be a cop. There were photos of Dylan's car, his apartment building, even his work schedule. Ricky had been thorough. "He's been seeing your wife for about 4 months, Ricky continued. "They usually meet at the Riverside Motel on Tuesday and Thursday nights. Classy guy, taking her to the same place you probably took dates in high school." 4 months. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. 4 months of lies, 4 months of fake smiles and empty I love yous, 4 months of her tracking my movements while she snuck around behind my back. "There's more," Ricky said. "Your daughter knows." My blood went cold. "What?" "Saw them together at the mall last weekend. Sienna was with some friends, spotted her mom and lover boy holding hands near the food court. According to my source, she didn't look surprised. That explained Sienna's recent attitude, her cold shoulder treatment, her sudden transformation from daddy's girl to hostile stranger. She'd been protecting her mother's secret while watching me stumble around in ignorant bliss. "What's the plan?" I asked. "We make them paranoid. Guilty people make mistakes when they're scared, and scared people reveal their true nature." Ricky handed me a small GPS tracker, identical to the one I'd found on my truck. "Dylan parks his Tesla in the same spot every day at work. Broad daylight, security cameras everywhere, but there's a blind spot near the dumpsters. You want me to bug his car? I want you to return the favor. Let's see how he likes being monitored." That afternoon, I drove downtown to Dylan's office building. The Tesla was exactly where Ricky said it would be, gleaming blue paint reflecting the cloudy sky like a mirror. I'd always hated people who drove cars worth more than most people's annual salary, and now I had a personal reason to despise this particular vehicle. The parking lot was busy with lunch hour traffic, people coming and going without paying attention to a middle-aged guy in work clothes. I walked casually past the Tesla, dropped my keys near the rear wheel, and knelt down to retrieve them. It took exactly 10 seconds to attach the tracker to the undercarriage. As stood up, I found myself face to face with Dylan Reeves himself. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying that particular blend of arrogance and suspicion that tech bros had perfected. "Can I help you?" Up close, he was smaller than his photos suggested, maybe 5'8" in expensive shoes. His cologne was strong enough to choke a horse, and his handshake was the kind of limp, damp thing that made you want to wipe your palm afterward. "Just drop my keys," I said, holding them up. "Nice car. Thanks." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Do I know you from somewhere?" "Don't think so. I'm just a mechanic. I work on cars people can actually afford." The insult sailed right over his perfectly styled head. "Well, be careful around here. There's been some vandalism lately." "I'll keep that in mind." I walked away, feeling his eyes on my back. Let him wonder. By tonight, he'd have bigger things to worry about than a random encounter in a parking lot. That evening, I watched the tracker data on my laptop. Dylan had driven straight from work to an upscale bar downtown, where he'd spent 2 hours before heading to the Riverside Motel. According to the timestamps, Marissa had arrived 15 minutes later. I sat in my living room, drinking beer, and watching my marriage dissolve in real time through GPS coordinates. The technology that was supposed to keep families connected was showing me exactly how mine had fallen apart. Around 10 p.m., both trackers showed movement. Dylan back to his condo, Marissa heading home. I turned off the laptop and pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed, smelling like guilt and Dylan's overpowering cologne. "How was work?" I mumbled, playing the role of the oblivious husband. "Long day. I'm exhausted." I bet." She curled up on her side of the bed, careful not to touch me. We lay there in the darkness, two people sharing a bed and nothing else, while the GPS tracker under her lover's car continued transmitting his location to my phone. Tomorrow, I decided, it was time to start applying pressure. Guilty people made mistakes when they were scared, and I was about to give them plenty of reasons to be terrified. Friday brought the kind of crisp autumn morning that made you believe in fresh starts and second chances. Too bad I wasn't interested in either. I'd spent the night monitoring Dylan's movements, learning his patterns. Coffee shop at 7 a.m., gym at lunch, happy hour at the same bar where he'd met my wife. Predictable as clockwork, which would make what came next much easier. Marissa left early for client meetings again. The lies were coming so naturally now that I wondered if she'd forgotten what truth sounded like. My first stop was the Riverside Motel. The desk clerk was a kid who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, which made him perfect for my purposes. "I think my wife might be having an affair," I told him, sliding a 20 across the counter. "Blue Tesla, pretty brunette, usually Tuesday and Thursday nights." He glanced around nervously, then pocketed the bill. "Room 237. They've been regulars for months." "How many months?" "Since summer. Always pay cash, never cause trouble." Since summer. So it had been going on longer than Ricky thought. I thanked the kid and drove to my next destination. Marissa's real estate office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, all charm and professional ambition. Her boss, Patricia Hendricks, was a woman who'd built her reputation on discretion and results. She also happened to be a deacon at the Methodist Church and took a dim view of moral flexibility. I'd met Patricia at company Christmas parties, where she'd always seemed impressed by my blue-collar authenticity. Today, I was counting on that goodwill. "Nathan, what a pleasant surprise," she said when I walked into her office. "Is everything all right? You look troubled." "I'm worried about Marissa," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "She's been working such long hours lately, staying out until all hours. I'm concerned about her stress levels." Patricia frowned. "Long hours? Nathan, Marissa hasn't worked past 6 p.m. in weeks. In fact, I've been concerned about her lack of dedication lately. She's been taking a lot of personal time, client meetings that don't appear in our system, property showings that never generate paperwork. Between you and me, I've been wondering if she's considering a move to another agency." I let my face show exactly the right amount of confusion and hurt. "She told me she was working late almost every night this week." Patricia's expression shifted from concern to understanding. As a woman who'd been married for 30 years, she recognized the signs. "I see," she said quietly. "Nathan, I'm very sorry. I just want to know the truth." She nodded. "I'll be keeping a closer eye on Marissa's schedule going forward." I left the office, knowing that Marissa's professional life was about to become much more complicated. Patricia Hendricks didn't tolerate dishonesty from her employees, and she certainly wouldn't appreciate being used as an alibi for adultery. My next stop was Dylan's office building. I parked across the street and waited, watching the lunch crowd come and go. At exactly 12:15, Dylan emerged and walked toward the gym 3 blocks away. I followed at a distance, noting how he moved with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences. That was about to change. The gym was one of those upscale places that catered to people who wanted to exercise without sweating too much. All chrome and mirrors and pretension. I waited outside until Dylan emerged 45 minutes later, then followed him back to his car. The Tesla's paint job was immaculate, the kind of finish that cost more than most people spent on an entire vehicle. I admired it for a moment, then pulled out my keys and dragged them along the driver's side door in one long, satisfying scratch. The sound was like fingernails on a chalkboard, sharp and grating and permanent. I was halfway back to my truck when Dylan's voice cut through the parking lot air. "Hey! Hey!" I turned to see him running toward his car, his face shifting from confusion to rage as he saw the damage. "You son of a bitch!" he screamed, spinning around to face me. You keyed my car, did I? I walked back slowly, hands in my pockets. That's a shame. Beautiful car like that. I saw you. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. Tell them a stranger scratched your car in a public parking lot. I'm sure they'll drop everything to investigate. Dylan was practically vibrating with fury, his carefully styled image cracking under pressure. Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost to fix? More than most people make in a month, I'd guess. But then again, you can afford it, right? Especially with all the money you save by screwing other men's wives instead of paying for your own entertainment. The color drained from his face. What did you say? You heard me, Dylan. Or should I call you D? That's how you're listed in my wife's phone. He took a step backward, his bravado evaporating. I don't know what you're talking about. Room 237, at the Riverside Motel. Tuesday and Thursday nights. Blue Tesla in the parking lot. My wife Marissa in your bed. Ring any bells? Dylan's mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water. Whatever he'd expected when he started his affair with a married woman, a face-to-face confrontation with the husband, clearly wasn't part of the plan. Look, man, I can explain. No need. I understand perfectly. You saw something you wanted, and you took it. The question is, what are you going to do now that I know? Are you threatening me? I'm informing you. See, Dylan, you made a mistake when you put that tracker on my truck. You turned this from a simple case of adultery into something more personal. Now I know where you live, where you work, where you eat lunch, and where you take my wife to play house. I pulled out my phone and showed him the tracking app. Nice condo, by the way. Great view of the river. Must be expensive. His face went white. You're insane. I'm thorough. There's a difference. I walked back to my truck, leaving Dylan standing next to his damaged Tesla, probably wondering how his perfect little secret had turned into a nightmare. As I drove away, I could see him in my rearview mirror, frantically dialing his phone. Calling Marissa, no doubt, to warn her that her husband was no longer the clueless fool they'd taken him for. Let them panic. Let them scramble to figure out how much I knew and what I planned to do about it. Guilty people made mistakes when they were scared, and I was just getting started. The call came at 2:47 p.m. Nathan, we need to talk. Marissa's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Sure, what's on your mind? Not over the phone. Meet me at home, now. I took my time driving back, stopping for gas and a sandwich, letting her anxiety simmer. When I finally walked through the front door, I found Marissa pacing the living room like a caged animal. Her perfect composure had cracked, revealing the desperation underneath. Sit down, she said, pointing at the couch. I'm comfortable standing. Nathan, please. We need to discuss this like adults. Discuss what? Your affair with Dylan Reeves? Your decision to track my movements while you snuck around behind my back? Or maybe we should talk about how our 16-year-old daughter has been covering for you. Marissa's face crumpled. How long have you known? Long enough to get very creative with my response. She sank into her chair, the fight going out of her. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? You were going to leave me for a tech bro with more money and less mileage? Or were you planning to keep both of us on the hook indefinitely? I don't know. I was confused, unhappy. So you decided to solve your problems by creating bigger ones. Marissa looked up at me with tears in her eyes, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Can we fix this? She asked. Can we go to counseling, work things out? You mean after you explain to Patricia Hendricks why you've been lying about your work schedule? After you tell Sienna that her parents' marriage was a fraud? After Dylan explains to his insurance company how his Tesla got keyed in broad daylight? Her tears stopped. You keyed his car? Among other things. Nathan, what have you done? I pulled out my phone and opened the tracking app, showing her Dylan's current location. I've been returning the favor. Amazing how easy it is to monitor someone when you put your mind to it. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. See, Marissa, you made a fundamental error in judgment. You assumed I was too stupid, too trusting, or too beaten down to fight back. You were wrong on all 3 counts. I walked to the window, looking out at Mrs. Talbot's house. The old gossip was probably watching from behind her curtains, sensing drama in the air. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to end things with Dylan immediately. You're going to tell Sienna the truth about why you've been lying to both of us. And you're going to figure out how to salvage what's left of your career after Patricia realizes you've been using the company as cover for your affair. And if I don't? I turned back to face her. Then I make your life very complicated. See, I've learned a lot about Dylan over the past few days. His work schedule, his habits, his expensive tastes. Did you know he's been claiming you as a business expense? Apparently, taking clients out for entertainment is tax deductible. Marissa's face went pale. How could you possibly know that? I'm full of surprises these days. The truth was, I was bluffing about the tax fraud. But Marissa's reaction told me I'd hit close to home. Guilty people always assumed you knew more than you actually did. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. Speak of the devil. Dylan wants to meet with me. Apparently he has something important to discuss. Nathan, don't what? Don't give him the same courtesy he showed me? Don't treat him with the same respect he showed my marriage? I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Marissa, you might want to check your phone. I think you'll find Dylan has some interesting news to share. I left her sitting in the living room and drove to the address Dylan had texted. Riverside Park, the same place where Marissa and I had gotten engaged 20 years ago. The irony was almost too perfect. Dylan was waiting by the lake, his expensive clothes looking out of place against the autumn trees. He'd traded his usual arrogance for nervous energy, constantly checking his phone and glancing around like he expected an ambush. Thanks for coming, he said as I approached. Wouldn't miss it. What's so important that you couldn't say it over the phone? Look, I know you're angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover it. But we need to figure out how to handle this situation like civilized people. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Civilized? You've been sleeping with my wife for months, Dylan. You put a tracking device on my truck. You turned my daughter against me by making her complicit in your lies. What part of that strikes you as civilized? I never meant for anyone to get hurt. But you didn't care if they did, as long as you got what you wanted. Dylan ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, destroying the careful arrangement. What do you want? Money? I can pay for the damage to your marriage. You think this is about money? Isn't it? Guys like you, it's always about money. The casual dismissal, the automatic assumption that I could be bought off like some kind of blue-collar stereotype, was the final straw. 20 years of marriage, 18 years of raising a daughter, decades of building a life, and he thought it all had a price tag. You're right, I said quietly. This is about money, your money, specifically. I pulled out my phone and showed him a series of photographs. Dylan's face went from confusion to horror as he recognized images of his condo, his car, his office building. See, Dylan, I've been thinking about our situation, and I realized something important. You're not just a homewrecker, you're a liability. What are you talking about? Your company's code of conduct policy. Very strict about employees engaging in behavior that reflects poorly on the organization. Affairs with married women definitely qualify. You can't prove anything. I don't have to. I just have to make your boss curious enough to ask questions. Amazing what people discover when they start looking closely at someone's activities. Dylan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went white. That would be your supervisor, I said. Apparently, someone sent him some very interesting photographs of you and a married woman at a local motel, along with detailed records of your afternoon client meetings that never appeared on your calendar. You son of a bitch. I'm just getting started. I showed him another series of photos on my phone. Dylan's Tesla in various parking lots, time-stamped and geotagged. Your insurance company might also be interested in these, especially the ones showing you driving during hours when you called in sick to work. This is blackmail. This is consequences. You wanted to play games with other people's lives, Dylan. Now you get to find out what happens when someone plays games with yours. His phone rang. The caller ID showed his office number. Answer it, I said. Tell them where you've been spending your afternoons. Dylan stared at the phone like it was a snake, then looked back at me with something approaching respect. What do you want? I want you to disappear. I want you to end things with Marissa immediately and permanently. I want you to find a new job in a different city, preferably in a different state. And if I don't, then I keep making your life interesting. See, Dylan, you made the mistake of thinking I was just another dumb mechanic you could push around. But I've been fixing broken things for 25 years, and I'm very good at figuring out how they work. I pocketed my phone and started walking back toward my truck. Oh, and Dylan? Next time you want to track someone, make sure they don't know how to track you back. I left him standing by the lake, his phone ringing insistently, and his carefully constructed life falling apart one phone call at a time. When I got home, Marissa was gone. So was her suitcase, half her clothes, and the joint savings account we'd spent 18 years building together. But Sienna was in the kitchen, making dinner for the first time in months. Mom told me everything, she said without looking up from the stove. She said you knew about Dylan. I did. She said she's staying at Aunt Linda's for a while, probably for the best. Sienna turned to face me, and for the first time in months, she looked like my daughter again, instead of a hostile stranger. Dad? I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I didn't know what to do. It wasn't your job to fix your mother's mistakes. Are you getting divorced? I don't know yet, but whatever happens, you and I are going to be fine. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I made your favorite, meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Sounds perfect. We ate dinner together, father and daughter, while my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages from Marissa and Dylan. I ignored them all. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out what came next. Tonight, I was having dinner with the one person in this mess who still mattered. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Marissa got the house, I got my freedom, and Sienna got to choose where she wanted to live. She chose me. Dylan moved to Phoenix after losing his job and most of his savings to lawyers and therapists. Last I heard, he was working tech support for a cable company and driving a used Honda. Marissa eventually found work at a different real estate agency, but her reputation in Millbrook never recovered. Small towns have long memories, especially when it comes to scandal. As for me, I opened my own garage with the money from selling my half of the house. Business is good, partly because I'm skilled at what I do, and partly because everyone in town knows the story of how I outmaneuvered the people who tried to destroy my life. Talbot still watches from her kitchen window, but these days she waves when she sees me. Even the neighborhood gossip queen respects a man who fights back. I never did find out who bought that original GPS tracker. Marissa claimed it was Dylan's idea. Dylan swore it was hers. In